On a deadly, snowbound night, a desperate Apache woman knocked on a lonely cowboy's door with one shocking demand: share warmth or face death. What happened inside that cabin changed both their lives forever. And days later, her tribe returned with something unexpected. Want to know what happened next? Don't forget to like and subscribe. The wind that night did not simply blow. It roared like a living force across the empty American frontier, rattling the thin wooden walls of Daniel's cabin. Snow had buried the land so deeply that even the familiar trails had vanished beneath white silence. Inside, Daniel sat close to the fire, his rough hands stretched toward the flickering flames, trying to draw out every bit of warmth. He had faced winters before, but this one felt different. Colder, lonelier, almost unforgiving. The isolation pressed heavily on him, making every sound, every creak of wood feel louder than it should have been. Daniel had built this life himself, far from towns and people, believing solitude was easier than dealing with the troubles of others. But nights like this made him question that choice. The storm outside seemed endless, and the fire, no matter how carefully he fed it, struggled to fight the creeping cold. He wrapped his coat tighter, staring into the flames as if they could answer the silence. Just as he began to settle into the quiet, a sudden sharp knock broke through the storm's howl, freezing him in place. For a moment he thought he imagined it. No one traveled in weather like this. The land was too dangerous, the cold too deadly. But then it came again, louder, urgent, undeniable. Daniel stood slowly, his instincts alert. He reached for the door, hesitating only briefly before pulling it open. A blast of icy wind rushed in, carrying snowflakes that stung his face. And there she stood, an Apache woman, trembling, her strength nearly gone, her presence both unexpected and impossible to ignore. Her condition told a story of struggle without needing many words. Her clothes were worn and torn, barely protecting her from the brutal cold. Frost clung to her hair and skin, and her breathing was shallow, uneven. Yet her eyes, steady, focused, held a strength that refused to break. She looked directly at Daniel, as if measuring him in that single moment. Then, with a voice that was quiet but firm, she made her demand clear: "Share your bed, or I freeze tonight." The words caught Daniel off guard. It wasn't just what she said, but how she said it, direct, without fear, yet filled with urgency. For a brief second, uncertainty crossed his mind. He had lived alone for so long, trusting no one, keeping his distance from the world. Letting a stranger in, especially in such a vulnerable situation, went against everything he had built around himself. But as he looked at her again, he saw not a threat, but someone standing. On the edge of survival. Without another word, Daniel stepped aside, holding the door open. The decision was simple, though it carried weight. She entered slowly, her movements careful, as if even walking required effort. The warmth of the cabin began to reach her, but it was clear she had endured more than just a cold night. Daniel quickly closed the door, shutting out the storm once more, and moved to add more wood to the fire. The flames grew stronger, casting light across the small space they now shared. He offered her a seat near the fire, along with a thick blanket and what little food he had. She accepted silently, wrapping herself tightly, as if holding onto the warmth for dear life. The room remained quiet, filled only with the crackling fire and the distant roar of the storm outside. There was tension between them, not from fear, but from unfamiliarity. Two strangers, brought together by circumstance, each carrying their own past, now sharing the same fragile shelter. As the minutes passed, something subtle began to shift. The harshness of the storm outside made the small cabin feel like the only safe place in the world. Daniel kept a respectful distance, allowing her space, while still ensuring she had everything she needed. in that quiet exchange, without trust fully formed, without words fully spoken, something deeper began to grow. It was not comfort, not yet, but a shared understanding. That night, in the heart of a frozen wilderness, survival depended not just on warmth, but on humanity. The fire burned steadily now, its warmth filling the small cabin as the storm outside intensified, pressing against the walls like an uninvited force. Snow continued to fall without mercy, sealing every path and turning the outside world into a frozen prison. Inside, Daniel adjusted the logs carefully, ensuring the flames would last through the night. He could feel the weight of the situation. 2 strangers, 1 shelter, and no escape until morning. Yet despite the tension, there was a quiet sense of control in his actions, as if maintaining the fire meant holding on to hope. Daniel made a clear choice without speaking it aloud. He offered her the bed, a simple gesture that carried quiet respect, and settled himself near the fire instead. The Apache woman noticed this immediately. Her sharp eyes followed his movements, studying him with a mixture of caution and curiosity. She had expected something different, perhaps even feared it, but his restraint shifted her expectations. It wasn't just kindness, it was dignity, and in a night filled with uncertainty, that dignity created a fragile sense of safety between them. Wrapped in blankets, she slowly began to relax, though the exhaustion in her body was undeniable. After a long silence, she spoke, not with urgency this time, but with honesty. Her voice carried the weight of days spent, fighting against the storm. She explained how her tribe had been traveling when the blizzard struck without warning. The wind scattered them, separating families and leaving her alone in a landscape that offered no mercy. For days she had wandered, searching, surviving, hoping to find shelter before her strength ran out. Daniel listened without interruption, his focus steady, his expression thoughtful. As her story unfolded, the meaning behind her earlier words became clear. It had never been a demand driven by boldness or intent. It was a final attempt to survive. That realization settled deeply within him. He had judged the moment too quickly, but now he understood it fully. The storm had stripped everything down to its simplest truth. Survival leaves no room for pride, only for action, and she had done what she needed to do. Time moved slowly through the night, marked only by the crackling of fire and the fading strength of the storm outside. They spoke little after that, but silence no longer felt heavy. Instead, it became something shared, something understood. Occasionally, Daniel added more wood to the fire, ensuring the warmth never faded. She rested, her breathing gradually steadying, her strength slowly returning. In that quiet space, trust began to form. Not loudly, not suddenly, but in small, steady moments that neither of them fully noticed. By the early hours of morning, the storm began to lose its grip. The fierce wind softened, and the snowfall slowed to a gentle drift. A pale light started to seep through the cracks of the cabin, signaling the return of day. Daniel rose and opened the door slightly, letting in the cold but calm air. The world outside had transformed, still frozen, still harsh, but no longer threatening in the same way. It was a new beginning, quiet and still. When she prepared to leave, there was a noticeable change in her presence. The exhaustion remained, but her strength had returned, and her eyes carried something new: gratitude. She stepped toward the door, then paused, turning back to Daniel. For a moment, words seemed unnecessary, but she chose them carefully. She thanked him, not just for the shelter, but for the respect he had shown when she needed it most. She promised that such kindness would not be forgotten, her voice steady and certain. Daniel simply nodded, watching as she stepped out into the snow-covered land. There was no expectation, no demand for anything in return. He had done what he believed was right, nothing more. The door closed behind her, and the cabin returned to its quiet state. Yet something had changed within him. The loneliness he once accepted so easily now felt different, as if the night had reminded him of the value of connection, even in its simplest form. Days passed, and the storm became nothing more than a memory etched into the frozen landscape. Daniel returned to his routine, though his thoughts often drifted back to that night. Then, one afternoon, the stillness outside was broken by movement. Figures approached his cabin. Several of them, strong and steady, his instincts sharpened immediately. But as they came closer, he saw something unexpected in their posture. They were not approaching with hostility, but with purpose and calm. When they reached his cabin, it became clear who they were, members of her tribe. The same woman stood among them, no longer weak, but strong and confident. She met his gaze with a quiet assurance. There were no raised voices, no threats, only respect in their presence. Through her, they expressed their gratitude, acknowledging what Daniel had done. But they had not come empty-handed. They brought with them an offer, one that carried the weight of trust, alliance, and a chance to change his life in ways he had never imagined.